What is up, YouTube, and welcome back to Lil Jitsu. In one of my previous videos, someone commented and asked me what my opinions on combat jiu-jitsu were. So today I'm going to be doing two things. One, I'm going to tell you what combat jiu-jitsu is if you don't already know, and two, I'm going to tell you what my opinions on it are. Before we get started, please, if you're new, consider subscribing to my channel. It means a lot to me. And if you find this video beneficial or enjoyable in any way, hit the like button. It helps me, helps the algorithm, and we all know how important that is. Let's get into it. What is combat jiu-jitsu? Combat jiu-jitsu is a new style of jiu-jitsu competition created by the one and only Eddie Bravo, where open hand strikes are allowed. Eddie Bravo, if you didn't already know, is also a big contributor to the popularity and the growing popularity of no-gi-only jiu-jitsu and submission-only jiu-jitsu. Eddie Bravo wanted to create a style of competition that went back to kind of the roots of jiu-jitsu, where it was more of a self-defense, and wanted to emphasize that in the sport or the competition. He also wanted to stray away from the points and advantage scoring that is very prevalent in the more traditional organizations such as the IBJJF. As far as the rules of combat jiu-jitsu go, they're fairly simple. 1. Open hand strikes are only allowed when one or both of the competitors are already on the ground. On the ground means either on their knees or on their butts in guard. 2. The match ends by submission, TKO, or EBI overtime rules. If you don't know what EBI overtime rules are, go ahead and look those up on your own. There's plenty of videos about that, also created by Eddie Bravo. And the third rule is, if there are no takedowns or guard pulls in the first minute of the match, a coin is tossed to determine who starts on bottom. The rules were designed to make the competition more exciting and to limit the risk of two opponents just having a wrestling match where there's both no striking and no jiu-jitsu. In my opinion, combat jiu-jitsu is essentially a watered-down version of MMA and a watered-down version of jiu-jitsu. If your goal is to be effective at self-defense and to learn how to fight and have that ability, MMA is going to encompass more of that situation. Strikes, punches, and kicks, as well as standing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, all of it. If your goal is to learn jiu-jitsu, adding open hand strikes into the mix of that is going to drastically reduce your overall options for how the round can go. So it's not going to be as fun or as open-ended. That being said, you can train jiu-jitsu with a self-defense mindset. Anyone that's done jiu-jitsu for a fair amount of time can watch the professor show a technique, look at the technique, and think to themselves, would I want to be there in a self-defense situation? Can I get hit there? Can I get kicked there? Would I want to be there? So you can train jiu-jitsu with that mindset and become more self-aware and roll in a self-aware way that'll make you better at self-defense. And then, if you want, you can throw in a little combat jiu-jitsu, light, open hand strikes into the mix just to help you build that confidence in your self-defense jiu-jitsu. Personally, I just see combat jiu-jitsu as kind of a niche area of jiu-jitsu, and I don't really see it gaining in popularity like submission only, or no-gi, or MMA. It is exciting to watch. Personally, I would rather watch jiu-jitsu, or I would rather watch MMA. I don't want to see a mix of the two put together. And I think that's a fairly accurate assessment of my opinions on combat jiu-jitsu overall. Not to mention, if my goal was to become a professional, I would much rather be a professional jiu-jitsu athlete over a professional combat jiu-jitsu athlete. Granted, you can do both, but I don't really want to get hit in the face, and there's not a lot to gain by being a combat jiu-jitsu champion because it is such a small niche area of the sport. Also, MMA definitely pays more than combat jiu-jitsu. The main takeaway of combat jiu-jitsu is it is throwing a new sport out there and kind of highlighting the negatives of jiu-jitsu. If you watch a combat jiu-jitsu match and you're a guard player in jiu-jitsu, you're going to very quickly realize what you should and should not be doing from the ground in a self-defense situation where you can get punched. They're not punching in combat jiu-jitsu, but those open hand strikes are gnarly. They're hitting with like the middles of their hands. It's not a slap. And by watching that, you're going to learn that if you want to be good at self-defense, you got to learn some top game, you got to learn some takedowns, and you got to learn how to protect yourself when you do end up on bottom. From a competitor's standpoint, I believe jiu-jitsu is going to be a lot more popular than combat jiu-jitsu because you don't get hit in the face. And on the other hand, if you want to be a good fighter, MMA is going to be much more popular than combat jiu-jitsu or jiu-jitsu with slaps added into it. Those are my opinions on combat jiu-jitsu. Hopefully you guys found them insightful in some way. Thanks for watching to the end of the video, and if you did make it to the end of the video, comment below whether or not you see combat jiu-jitsu growing in popularity. As always, stay consistent, go train.